All right. The band is playing right now. Rob Brown, Kevin Skarbinski, Ronnie Sanders, Die Hard Wednesday edition. Got a great guest today. Another one of Ronnie's friends from the coaching ranks, Les Snead, general manager of the Los Angeles Rams, who won the 21 Super Bowl. So, guys, take a picture with your phone of the QR code so you can subscribe to this channel. AU Undercover 24/7. They're putting out content. No kidding, 24/7. I mean, it is nonstop. Philip Marshall, Nathan King, Jason Caldwell, Christian Clemente, Ronnie Sanders, Mildred, everybody goes to this channel. 97 million page views last year. Even folks in Columbiana have figured this one out. But Ronnie, I want you to make the introduction, man. This is a cool guest, and I am ready to take notes.
Well, Wes, I appreciate you being with us. It's great to welcome you to the podcast. Appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, anytime I can come on a podcast. I think Rob opened up with, Barber County, Alabama. There's not many podcast hosts who know where Barber County, Alabama is. So yeah, we'll start there. So it's great. It's great to feel like I felt like I'm back home, or at least close to it.
Well, the funny thing is, Johnny Hager just sent me a text. He said his mama, Pam, was my first boss at WULA one summer. She let David Nolan and me have our own Saturday night show. And he was talking about Michael Thomas, the greatest athlete you'd seen until you got to the NFL. But we were talking about you on the fishing trip a few weeks ago because we're proud of you. I'm an Auburn grad, but you've done a phenomenal job in your career. And I know there's a ton of questions, but for everybody watching, you're one of the architects, kind of like the guys that painted the frescoes at the Sistine Chapel in the NFL. And I think probably the first good question is, what are you seeing now among the kids coming out of college with the portal, guys moving around a lot, NIL? Has that been enough time for it to have an effect on what you're seeing when you go out and grade players? Because you started, your resume is amazing.
Really good question. I mean, I think there's definitely some surface level things that you're noticing, right? I mean, just, hey, kids are changing. They're in different uniforms. You got to figure out where they're at. All of those things, very logistical. Anybody can handle that. Someone asked me this the other day. I'm not sure we have had enough time to go, okay, there is a dramatic change in who the human being is. I think you could probably say that this generation of kid is different than a previous generation, but I'm not sure it's the portal. So we probably haven't seen that quite yet on if there's a major variable or something that weighs a lot, that it's definitely making an impact on the football field. I do think I was at a school recently, though. Here's what I did notice. I won't bring up the player's name. Very successful player at a previous school. He was at a new school, learning a new system, getting to know new teammates. I was watching him during practice, and you could tell that he was there. He was ridden with anxiety because he hadn't quite gotten comfortable in this new system yet. There was an element of some of the teammates where you could see their frustration bubbling, and I just couldn't help but think, that you had success somewhere else. You make that move, and that's stressful, right? You got to pick up, move, go to a new ecosystem, new system, learn new verbiage, get to know chemistry. So you can see some of those things as you visit around, but that's the nature of the business we're in.
Yeah, fun to watch, Ronnie.
Yeah, talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, the process of watching Jarquez Hunter and taking him in the draft, and what made you take him, what was impressive, and what jumped out at you to make you go ahead and decide to take the leap.
I think we do have a badge. I say that we have fun in scouting. I guess we try to make football fun. It should be fun, right? But they're little emoji bad. But long story short, if you have fun watching a player, you can kind of stamp that, tag that, like, okay, when we all go to evaluate, you got to get through so many games of footage and things like that. So there's an element of drudgery to that, right? But there's some players that you just want to, let's put another game on and watch that one. I think Jarquez was one of those guys that you really had fun watching, and he, especially once he got to the second level, and when defenders tried to tackle him and they figured out, wait a minute, this guy's a little bit stronger than some of the other ones we tried to tackle. I remember even when we went to pads first time, I think some of our defenders had said to our coaching staff, "Uh-oh, that one's different, right? That guy's different when you try to arm tackle him." And again, when we first started practicing, we don't tackle here, but there's an element of thud and wrapping up. So that's kind of the superpower that he had, and one of the reasons we drafted him.
Yep. Kevin.
Les, how do you find yourself leaning towards guys that play in certain programs or that play for certain coaches, and not just head coaches? Does it go down to if a guy's been coached by a certain assistant coach at his position and he has a track record of turning out NFL ready or NFL quality guys? Do you lean towards that direction when you're scouting these guys?
That I believe the answer would be yes. I think over time, over history, there's definitely some cases, some precedents where a player for players who have the ability from a certain program, when they do get to our level and calibrate, they usually succeed, or they succeed more than others. But now going back to the first question with the portal and transferring, that is disrupting. That's one thing I can say. That's a disruption that's going on there. You're leaving a program and going somewhere else. So, but that is certainly the case, because this game, I would say the college game, even I guess you call it, we're cousins, college football and NFL football, but the game theory is different. The rules are different. The hashes are different. The schemes, even though there's similarities, it's different. So there is an adjustment that each player is going to have to make when they go from that level of the video game to ours, and some adjust quicker, better, more efficiently, smoother than others. And sometimes it was certain type or specific types of programs and who's running those programs.
That's an interesting. One question I'm going to ask: how much leverage does the NFL? I'm going to imagine a lot. If you were to be, and we know Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl, who'll come on the show.
Yeah.
Jim's now at Oklahoma. But if you were, let's say, at Auburn, at a practice, you make notes. What are those typical meetings like with position coaches, head coaches, or GMs or whatever?
It's interesting. I don't get it to as many practices. Let's call it. I mean, we have a scouting staff, and let's call it the gentleman that covers Auburn will probably be in Auburn at least 2 to 3 to 4 times a year, right? And again, probably starting in August when camp's going on, at least one more time during the fall, maybe twice, and probably one more time during the spring, and over time, right? They're connecting with the coaches and really trying to figure out. At the end of the day, you're trying to figure out how does the player, the person behave, right? And it's not behavior like, okay, I'm gonna walk an old lady across the road. That would be nice. It's not. I'm not gonna speed today. It's more. Do you wake up every day and do you care about football? Are you committed to football? And do your behaviors when it comes to that care and commitment, right, shine through? So there is that element of, right, being a citizen. Everyone, that's a prerequisite, right? Most of us have an intuition of right and wrong. Shouldn't be too hard to do right more times than you do wrong in that case. But the hard part is, right, the stress and drudgery it takes to be great at something like football. That's the hard part. And that's what we're trying to figure out, right? Those kids that are on campus, right, are they there because of NIL money, right? And that's a reward. But at the end of the day, are they really there because they can't live without football? They want to be great at it, and they're willing to, let's call it, put in a little stress and drudgery, trying to become good to great at it. So that's what we're trying to find out when we're on those campuses. And when I jump in, usually I like to go down and my favorite question to ask is, hey, here's the deal. That's when you can give me 3 names You can do that as a GM a little bit,
Yeah.
right? You can go down and say, I don't need 10. I need your 3. They don't have to be your best 3. But if we're building an arc over here, and we're going to go down to Spring River in Arkansas, which three are we putting on the boat with us to make sure we get from north to south or wherever we're trying to get?
Yeah, gotcha. Ronnie, that's cool.
I got 2 questions. So how did 2 Auburn guys end up as GMs in LA? And and then talk about your
come on. Auburn's in Lower Alabama. Maybe it's Central Alabama. It's getting close to Lower Alabama.
That's true.
I've been in LA my whole life.
That's
I do know this. When I first met Joe Ortiz, probably 1995, I think he was a freshman. I mean, he walked on campus from Delaware. Don't know how he found Auburn at all. Just walks into the football complex, and in those days, it's things have changed. In those days, hey, I'd love to work in football. Okay, well, let's go back. We called it our graduate assistant room back there. Come back here. We'll find you something to do. At that point in time, he was just a freshman. And I remember when I moved on from Auburn, probably 1995 was my last season at Auburn in terms of working there. And Joe was probably a freshman. So then he, and obviously he evolved there. So I remember over the years, again, that would not have been on the bingo card in 1995 that myself in 1995, there was no teams in Los Angeles, California.
That's true.
Much less 2 GMs from Auburn University.
Joe and I used to we used to go out and have a good time. His wife would actually go to the Supper Club with us just about every night. Every time we went.
The good old days.
Good old days.
Does the Supper Club still exist?
Sadly, no.
But they've opened a new one at the top of the new hotel in Auburn.
At the Graduate, right?
Yeah.
I think someone told me that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the. I think it's an upper. It's not anything like the.
Yeah. Maybe they could park the bus out back and take the tires off of it and just kind of sink it in. It would sort of feel back at home.
I can't say this, not to get too personal, but genetically, I'm wired to be an introvert. So back in the day, going to the Supper Club, there was nothing fun about the Supper Club. You know what? You were a college kid. You felt like you had to make an appearance. But I can promise you this: it was like, I'm suffering in here. That place used to get packed, and it was not made for introverts.
Yeah,
or built for introverts.
Talk about your time at Auburn a little bit. I mean, you went to school there, and then you were a graduate assistant with Terry. Talk about that experience.
Wow, that's. I knew you were going to ask this question, and that's memory lane for me. I always say, I always go, life in football, you do it on football season. So that was probably 1995 was my last season. So we're going into 25. What? That's 30 plus years ago. You know what's interesting? I think when you look back, playing football, going to school, the nostalgic of it all, you probably your brain tends to look at you remember the positives, right? I don't necessarily remember going to the Supper Club and going, wow, I dread going in here because it's going to be stuffy, crowded, and I'm an introvert. But I'm sitting there going, wow, I'd love to go back. I wish it was still there. We'd go back. But it's those, I don't want to call them, I say this, dark moments, soft moments, not dark in a way that's kind of, let's call it depressingly or evil dark. It's those moments that somehow your brain remember the memories. But I'll just use this as an example. I was just at the Texas at Ohio State game. I have a stepson who's at Texas, backup long snapper at Texas. So I'm a little bit at work, but also a little bit at play at Texas. But when they were going on their drive, even though it had been an up and down game, not so good game, I noticed Taylor Searles, kind of in the back off, in the corner watching this final drive. So I go over to Taylor and I said, hey, let's watch this thing together and see if we can pull this thing out. But if anyone doesn't know Taylor, it's, hey, at Auburn, I was with Stacy, her dad. Yeah. And now she's running on campus recruiting at the University of Texas. So I think when you're 30 plus years out, it's the relationships, it's the memories like that somehow compound. And you're like, wow, even though Stacy, your dad, was older than me, he was GAing when we were GAing at the same time. And in that GA room was Will Muschamp. So it's, how many head coaching jobs later, but you do remember us being in that graduate assistant room, having a blast, time of our life, making no money. But not a lot of responsibility, or maybe not a lot of accountability. Maybe we had some responsibility, not account, but those are the moments you remember. It's relationships like that. Rodney Garner. We had a mini camp in Maui, and lo and behold, Rodney Allison lives in Maui. Who would have thought Rodney Allison? He's from West Texas.
Yeah,
Who would have thought he was going to end up in Maui? But him and his son, came over and watched practice. So it's probably, I could sit here and name. We talked about Joe Ortiz, Taylor Morton, who's on our staff. First met him in that GA office. So whether it's Tommy Bowden, Terry, I can keep going on. Here's what's interesting, Rob. Neville Arena. Never been in Neville Arena, but come on, from Eufaula, Alabama, Bill Neville. Guy goes to Rice in Columbia and somehow falls in love with basketball. In between all that, invents something, patents it, and makes enough money to say, you know what, we'll name the we'll donate to Auburn, get the arena named after it. So that's what Auburn. That's what those memories mean to me.
I love it, Kevin.
Les, is it true? I think I read this. You were on UAB's first Division III football team back in '91.
Back in the day, we did a little bit too much transferring. So
with Jim Hillier, you were at Troy. You were at Troy and UAB before Auburn. What do you remember about that first year at UAB with Dr. Jim Hillier?
Those probably. Hey, he was an excellent teacher. You know what I mean? That's what you remember. That bunch trying to build a program. So I think that's what you remember about those moments. And going back to Auburn, life and football. I would say single mom, Eufaula, Alabama. So there's an element, was raised by a lot of football coaches. So I always go back and go, I mean, those were the really good friend of mine who I respect in the business, Bronco Mendenhall, who's now the head coach at Utah State. He grew up, his father, I want to call it, they're mentoring, developing horses, right? But he had this saying that you don't break a horse, you start a horse. Like a horse wasn't born to, let's call it, carry a human, so he had to start that. So he's kind of taking that mantra into, trying to develop kids. So that's where we're at. That's what I remember about. Even though there's probably some hard memories, right? 2-a-days, 3-a-days, some of the negative or the thorns to the roses.
How about the days with Rick Trickett?
Oh, that's if you can get through a practice with Rick Trickett, here's what I will say about Rick. And I can even pass it down to whether it's my kids that have played football, my stepson at Texas, whether it's their friends, and boy, they come in and they're down and out because their coaches, let's call it, the coaches tried to give them a little feedback, and maybe it came back in a harsher tone. And I usually go, look, let me just say this: they're yelling at you, they're taking time to yell at you. That means they love you. That's their love language. So you definitely remember that with Rick Trickett, but really good football coach. Still doing it. Isn't that amazing?
Still doing it.
Yeah, we had him on here, 6 weeks ago, guys, and he's 77. No loss of passion and fire in him. And I mentioned, like, you've got a staff, and the office that you're in. You look at the size now. When Billy Napier got to Florida, they took the team picture. There were more staff and support personnel than players dressed in jerseys. What's the front office, back office operation like for an NFL team compared to some of the colleges that you visit around the country today? Because I know it's changed a lot.
It's fascinating. I do think programs like Florida, probably some similar, have a lot more than we do. Now that gets into, I do know there is probably the variable where there's students on campus who would like to intern. So there's an element of probably a passionate labor force that they have right there in their ecosystem that we do not have. Now, I'm not saying we could probably find plenty of kids who'd like to come here and intern, but they're right there on campus, and that's probably a different story. I can't imagine leading or managing that Army, but I also, it's interesting with this advent of the new college GM. Some, let's call it Jim Nagy. Some NFL people going down to that level. I can't imagine dropping down to that level. I wouldn't. You could drop me into Auburn right now, and I would be like, okay, I don't even know where you find the list of players to. I mean, it's every high school in the nation. I know it's a little bit more specific than that, right? You're going to have regions and areas and things like that, but would basically anyone who can get into the portal, and any, let's call it high school senior that wants to play football, you somewhat have to have that covered. So I can't imagine the scope that it takes to make sure you're dialed in on knowing, right, the best talent available.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I know we're about out of time, but talk a little bit about how you broke into the NFL.
Growing up in Lower Alabama, as we were joking earlier, I don't even know if we knew the NFL existed, right? I think we only got the Falcons on the regional, and it wasn't like they were that good, even though I spent a good 13, 14 years in Atlanta as a Falcon. But we just weren't. It just wasn't. NFL wasn't necessarily top of mind, right? It was Auburn and Alabama and the SEC, and in those days, right, the Big Ten, Pac-12, whatever we called those conferences, Big Eights. They've changed so much, but they really didn't even exist. But what was interesting is as I evolved at Auburn, was probably going to either choose something, either a pre-medical, let's call it. Am I going to try to get into med school? Am I going to try to get into physical therapy school? Yeah. Am I going to do this coaching thing? Got the opportunity to stay at Auburn. But as that position evolved and hey, we want you to do this, work in recruiting, host the NFL scouts, general managers, people in the front office as they came in. That was the first time I was like, wait a minute, there's life outside of college football, and there's also life outside of coaching football. And so over that course of 2 years doing that role is where I met a lot of people and basically got the first opportunity in Jacksonville, Florida. So you think about you just think you're going to go from Auburn, Alabama to your first NFL job, and your first NFL job, you could probably put the logo on the screen and nobody would know they wouldn't know whether that was a Division II team or the Jacksonville Jaguars, because it was like I think I got there and it was season 2. And oh, by the way, when you drive from Eufaula to Jacksonville, you go through basically the southern part of Georgia into the northwest panhandle of Florida. Yeah. No one would have thought you were about to, let's call it, realize a dream of yours per se of making it to the NFL. So that's the break into the NFL.
Yeah. One other thing before we go to Kevin's got one more question. Johnny Haygood said on draft day back in the day, you used to sometimes not be at school. You had draft boards set up at your house and you had projections and you studied it when you were a kid. I think that's a cool story because you're living out what you saw as a kid.
Rob, in those days, I think the draft was on a Monday.
Yeah, it was one day.
Maybe it was on you skipped school, had a really good friend who was, you talk about dating yourself, and really good friend who happened to be, he was in Eufaula, Alabama, a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, loved the Steelers. Love the Steelers. He would call me from a payphone and this was probably when we were in maybe 9th or 10th grade hey, who are the Steelers draft? Give me an update. So in those days. So I guess it was destined, and probably coincidentally, and maybe even ironically, but definitely coincidentally, for some reason, I was a Eric Dickerson fan at SMU, probably because of those cool little whatever goggles he wore. Yeah. Did like those uniforms. I remember probably watching, I think it was a Cotton Bowl, him versus Dan Marino, and those ugly mustard uniforms. And so I kind of followed Eric Dickerson to the Rams, and the Rams were my first favorite at NFL team. So
That's pretty amazing.
I know, Les, you said you were at the Ohio State Texas game, and obviously you're there looking at individual players. What were your thoughts about the teams themselves?
you know what it was. I would say this: you could unbelievable atmosphere for opening day. That's probably a neat thing about when you have a heavyweight matchup. I think both teams probably wish they would have had maybe a warm-up matchup going into that, especially on both sides of the ball, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where both QBs were somewhat making their first start against probably more veteran defenses, and you felt that during the game. A lot of times this time of year, offenses are the old adage, right? Grandma, granddad says for whatever reason the defense is a little ahead of the offense, right? Because it takes a moment to get in to rhythm, especially when you spend all spring, all summer, all training camp really going against yourself. Like even in the NFL, we have preseason games and we have those joint practices. So, right, you line it up and wow, this is a heavyweight matchup. So it was. Defenses played well, and I think both of those teams' offenses, because they do have some firepower on both sides of the ball, and as they evolve during the year, I bet they're going to be more efficient, more potent offenses later in the season than they were that day.
Les, I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, but thank you so much for sharing your time. And Ronnie, what a great relationship, and Kevin, all of us. And as Auburn, we're proud of you. We've been watching your career, but this was special, and no wonder you're successful. But kind of cool to go back to Barber County on 431 and look back.
Oh, memory lane for sure. We could stay a little longer and continue, but we probably bore everyone.
Not at all. Not at all. People love it.
No, there's no doubt about. I definitely say that all the time. It's something. I think whatever the commercial, it's just different in the SEC, and there's an element of just different in college football. I had a blast last weekend. As I mentioned, Texas, Ohio State. Then I jumped down to the LSU at Clemson game, and it's just something about right. Wow, that's the atmosphere at that game. I'm not saying you don't get that in the NFL, but when you do walk on a college campus and that ecosystem, right? People, they're not just fans. It's like, okay, a lot of these people spend a lot of their good years on those campuses, and they're talking about the moments at the supper club, maybe in Clemson. They're talking about their moments at the SO club. Not as familiar with Columbus, Ohio, but over the years have seen that town evolve. The point being is you can tell a college campus, it's a living, breathing organism, and when you get that opening night, there's just something special about it. So I could sit here and talk all day college football. All the thorns that are going on now, there's plenty of roses, and I'm sure everyone's going to figure this thing out as it evolves and changes. That's just part of life, and that's the phase we're in. Looking forward to seeing how it all ends.
Yeah. It's can't get enough of it, though. I can promise you that. It's good to hear a general manager of a team that's just 3 years removed from a Super Bowl love college the way you do. I think you reaffirmed a lot of people's faith. This free market's going to work all this stuff out. But I mean, this is fantastic. I love it.
Oh yeah, those are the good old days. Definitely.
Yeah. They will.
Thanks again for taking time. We really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. I tell you what, Ronnie, you know, someone that is as high profile as he is, and I know a lot of great people from Barber County, Sean Thomas, Tom Mildrum, Jeff Taylor, just guys I went to Auburn with, but just watching his career, and y'all know him from when he was a GA, and he talked about that GA room that he was in, and he survived Rick Trickett. And then going back to Jim Hillier, Kevin, you need to write a book on the history of UAB. I mean,
if we had more time, I was going to ask him. I was at the first Division III game that UAB played back in '91. They played at Millsaps in Mississippi.
Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, and Coach Hillier let me go in the locker room before and after the game. It was a memorable experience. The game didn't go well for the Blazers, but their first official NCAA football game, they've come a long way since then.
Yeah, look at this. I got this sent to me yesterday it arrived via FedEx. 2010 Auburn National Champion pocket knife from my good friend Jim Humphrey down in Spring Hill, Florida. And I didn't even know they had these things, but don't they need to make 8 more? I'm just saying, By the way, Ronnie, Kevin, when's the merchandise coming out? Remember the Golden Flakes campaign for another school? Got 12. Is Auburn going to have got 9? Or is it got 9, pal? I mean, where's it coming?
I would think that somebody would take advantage of that from a merchandising standpoint.
I think I saw a Twitter post of an Auburn license plate with just the number 9 on it.
Nice.
You won't draw any wrath from anybody if you ride around with that, will you?
Well, hey, look, now's one of those moments in time for Auburn to feel really good about itself, while the rival across the state is feeling really bad about itself and being very vocal about its feelings.
Yes.
About its head coach. Very interesting, the contrast of the two openers. Auburn looked so prepared and well coached in that first game. And they did the thing, that every coach you talk to, Ronnie, and you've probably heard this, you probably hear this in your sleep. You got to run the ball and you got to stop the run before you do anything else. And Auburn did exactly that at Baylor, and Alabama could not do that at Florida State.
Yeah, Kevin, what's the temperature in Tuscaloosa right now? I mean, he's got a $60-something million buyout or whatever it is. I don't expect them to make a move on him or anything like that, but it's not pretty over there right now.
No, the temperature's gone up for sure. And some people have gone over the top saying fire him now, fire Greg Byrne, fire Kane Womack. Of course, that's extreme, and that's not going to happen. You also have to consider the economics of the situation. In the world we're in, you've got a revenue share with your athletes now. So just saying, well, the guy's not getting it done. One game into his second year is far too soon to make an evaluation on that. However, I think the biggest issue there is it looked far too much like the Vanderbilt game last year, the Oklahoma game last year, the Michigan game and the bowl game. And when you're 5-5 over a 10-game stretch, and that's not in a vacuum. And nothing that happens, and this is like any program, you're succeeding the most successful coach of the modern era. So you were never going to, I don't care who they hired, they were never going to live up to what they've been over the last 16 years.
Yeah.
But to drop off this drastically, and particularly from an effort and intensity standpoint, and I think that is the thing more than the final score, more than getting got by Gus Malzahn again, which they're familiar with, more than just losing the game. It was so many examples, so much tape of guys not giving 100% that has people very concerned. They can turn it around, obviously. The big question now is going to be they should win the next 2. They go to Georgia at the end of the month before Georgia goes to Auburn. So how do they look there?
One thing that Rob, I didn't mean to cut you off, but one thing that
no,
it's a little bit similar to when I went to Florida with Ron Zook, we replaced Spurrier, and Zook was in a little bit different situation than DeBoer. I mean, Ron Zook was the defensive coordinator of the Saints, and as he put it to me, what the hell am I supposed to do? Turn it down? Kalen DeBoer had just played for a national championship at Washington, and I don't think that anybody doubts that Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. But I thought from the day he was hired, there's no way it works. I mean, and not because nothing to do with his coaching ability or him being a bad guy or anything like that, because I think he's a great coach, and I think he's from everything I understand, he's a great guy. But if you're from South Dakota and you've worked at Indiana and Fresno State and Washington, and you walk into this, I mean, I don't see how it works. And again, I don't think it has anything to do with coaching ability. I think it has to do with the culture. I mean, I can guarantee you that there weren't what's going on the radio right now and what's going on the SEC network, that wasn't going on at Washington.
No. Well, how many times, guys, have we heard the word fit? Yeah. Fit matters. And Auburn doesn't have to look back far to Brian Harsin. Now, I would suggest that Kalen DeBoer is a much nicer person than Brian Harsin.
No question about that.
From everything that I know. But Brian Harsin was out of place at Auburn from the start. And now you have to wonder, is that repeating itself with Kalen DeBoer in Tuscaloosa? Totally different from a recruiting standpoint, obviously. Alabama's recruiting is, if not quite at the Nick Saban level, they're close. But there's been a disconnect there. And the fact that it happened after what happened last year, that they started out this way this year, is the real concern. Because you wouldn't expect that in the first game. And everything that you heard, this is one of those things, those cautionary tales. You usually hear this coming out of fall camp. Oh, everything looks good. They're working hard. They're flying around the field.
Yeah.
The defense is just looking really stout, and the offense is sharp, and this guy stepped up. This guy's better than he was last year. This guy benches 500 pounds. The offensive line is a bunch of monsters. And then you get out there, and you hear their defensive coordinator saying they play timid and hesitant. You don't expect that in the opening game.
No.
You really don't.
Well, I think the big thing too is, from everything I've heard about DeBoer, whether it's his situation at Alabama or before he arrived, he's a little bit, look, his personality is not Nick Saban, and his demanding, the demands on the players are not the same. And I'm not saying that's bad, good, or anything else, but when it's been as buttoned up for 17 years as it's been in Tuscaloosa, and all of a sudden now it looks like Mike DeBose or Mike Shula, that's probably not headed in the right direction. And Kevin, you're right. Whoever took over was never going to have the success that Nick Saban had, which again DeBoer taking the job to me just doesn't make a lot of sense. I understand it's Alabama and it's a great job and you can win national championships and all that, but those are big shoes to fill.
Yeah. I want to throw something out there for y'all about that Auburn game. Watching it over in Atlanta Friday night, you got to be careful about paying attention to text threads. We're all on them. And people just automatically default to the negative. Here we go again. We suck. I didn't see that. What I saw out of Auburn, it really peaked in the locker room. I have not seen Hugh Freeze that excited, that into it in the locker room after a game the first 2 years he's been at Auburn. And they've lost more close games and found more ways to lose games in the last 2 years than any of us can ever remember. And Jackson Arnold, you got to have a little redneck in you if you're going to make it and be successful in life. You got to be tough. You got to be mean. I like this kid. I like him. I met him at media days, and that's a compliment. I mean, it's just he's tough, and he is like, hey, take what they give me. And we had Brandon Drum from OU Insider on this morning. His son is a young kid in high school now and has worked a lot with Jackson Arnold and Jeff Christensen in Dallas. And when you meet Jackson Arnold, the first thing that jumps out at you is he ain't afraid of anybody. You definitely know who the quarterback is, and he is your alpha team leader. I feel my projection for Auburn to win 10, I'm sticking to it. But the secondary, y'all know this. That's what they pay coaches to do. I'll start with whoever wants to go first. But defensive line, got to get more pressure. But the offense, hey, they took away the passing game, running game, 307 yards. When was the last time Auburn had an offensive line like this? 2017? I think there are a lot of good takeaways from 38-24 at Baylor. And they're not as eccentric as the yell leaders and stuff at A&M, but some of those Baylor line and Baylor cheerleaders, I don't know, maybe it's just the state of Texas, but I thought it was a hell of a win on the road.
Well, if you looked at the ESPN game predictor percentages yesterday, ESPN has Auburn winning 10 games. I mean, they've got A&M and Oklahoma, I believe, as they expect to win over Auburn. But even the Alabama game, I'm sorry, it was Georgia and A&M. But even the Alabama game, they had Auburn as I think 53% chance to win. Not that means anything. But I thought it was pretty interesting that an unranked Auburn team, ESPN's predicting to go 10-2.
Yeah.
Well, you know what you saw? What I saw from Jackson Arnold was some swagger. You know, he had a little edge to him. He had a little attitude. But let's say this, guys. And I mentioned this to you earlier today, Rob. We were talking on the telephone.
Mhm.
A little Jeff Berger to him.
Yeah.
As far as that, hey,
Yeah.
I'm in charge. Don't mess with me.
Yeah.
Kind of attitude that Jeff had back in the day. But anyone, and look, Jackson Arnold, yes, he leads the SEC in rushing after 1 week. Yes, he's the first Auburn quarterback since number 2 to run for 100 and pass for 100 in his first Auburn start. But if you use the name Jackson Arnold and Cam Newton in the same sentence, you should be slapped and sterilized. Okay?
Blasphemy.
There was only one Cam Newton. There will not be another.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever seeing Cam Newton slide at the end of a run.
No.
Now,
No.
I don't hold that against Jackson Arnold. That is smart.
Yeah.
You've got to, they need him to play the whole season based on what we saw in that first game. They also need him to throw the ball more effectively. They didn't have to do that to beat Baylor because, as you said, Rob, the way Baylor was playing defense, inviting them to run, so they did. And they did it very, very well. But so many positives out of that, but still things to build on. Still coaching points to make. Like you said, the secondary. You can't give up that many passing yards. And I didn't think Sawyer Robertson was very sharp. He threw for a lot of yards, but I just thought he was not. He didn't impress me with his command. He didn't impress me with his accuracy. He was right around 50%, I think, for the game. But I don't know that you could script a better start on the road in a hostile environment. No, it's not an SEC stadium, but that place was full. It was a blackout. They were wearing gold helmets. They pulled out all the stops. It was on national television. You had RG3, Baylor's Heisman-winning quarterback, in the booth. And yet Auburn pretty much controlled the game. So a lot of learning points, a lot of things to improve on, but best start Auburn's had in a while.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
I was agreeing.
One thing that's kind of jumped out to me, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but Auburn's always been the school that kind of sat back, didn't have an edge, didn't want to upset people, and now all of a sudden you've got a quarterback that's, takes you back to the '80s, and you've got an AD that really doesn't give a damn. I mean, and that's a big change for Auburn. I mean, the fact that he goes out and recognizes those national championships and the additional conference championships and is making no apologies for it and is getting the north end zone done and is putting up a scoreboard and is, all those things, all the facility stuff that's been talked about for quite a while. And as far as football goes, those things are moving now. And I haven't seen this much alignment since the '80s.
No, there's no question.
That's saying a lot.
And I will say this too. I mean, I talked to a lot of fans of a lot of different schools. Obviously, a lot of Auburn people. You look at the crowd. Great crowd went out there. They called it the blackout on the Brazos, and that's a really nice stadium. And you start thinking. I know Hezekiah Harris. I got to. We'll talk about that. Is he going to Tennessee now? He's left Auburn. Is that official in recruiting?
Yeah, but you know how that goes.
It's not official till he signs, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. But I think Auburn's got a lot of momentum right now, and I'm with you on the 9 national championships. When people ask me about it, I'll say, well, when Texas A&M joined the SEC during the summer of 2012, before they played their first SEC game against Florida in College Station, they won 2 national championships in July and August. It was a great summer.
Yep.
And we know about other schools that did it. Auburn has got to quit worrying about what other schools think that they do. And, you've got to, again, you got to have a little redneck in. You got to be mean. You got to be tough and aggressive. And Auburn's doing it. But John Cohen, I was not sure. I mean, I think, but what he did right there told the Auburn people, Auburn takes a back seat to no one. And I think that's fantastic. Tennessee's recognized them. Michigan claims 11 or 12 now. So why not do it? But, both of y'all, Auburn's got 2 games to fix a lot. Ball State's coming up this week and then South Alabama. But then, you've got to go on the road at Oklahoma and at Texas A&M. You're 4-1, 5-0 coming out of that. Every week sets up the next week. What is it that scares you the most when you look around the SEC? Because what I've seen so far is if you're the toughest, get after their ass for a full 60 minutes, you've got a chance against anybody in today's world because, Alabama's got the second most talented roster in the country. But you talk about a lack of effort, and they're not the only team. Arch Manning start polishing that Heisman. Really, it's a long way to go. I think it's the most wide open that we've seen it in memory in college football.
Well, Rob, I agree with you. And just looking down, and I've got it pulled up here in front of me. But if you look down Auburn's schedule, what this is probably, and look, I'm not saying it's not a hard schedule because it is. It's an SEC schedule, but this is, I don't want to say easy either, but it's the easiest Auburn schedule that in years. And certainly if you look at after the first weekend, and again, it's just the first weekend, but once you get past these next 2 weeks, you've got at Oklahoma, at A&M, Georgia at home, and then it kind of eases up a little bit. You've got Missouri, at Arkansas, Kentucky, at Vandy, Mercer, and then you wrap up with Alabama. So it's a manageable schedule. I mean, if you get out of the first half of the season 5-1, even 4-2, you got a chance to make a pretty good run.
I'm really interested to see, and we'll get a much better sense of how good Oklahoma is this weekend when they play Michigan out in Norman. They threw the ball. John Mateer, Oklahoma's new quarterback, they threw it very well. They didn't run it very well in their against their overmatched opponent last weekend. So it'll be interesting. They'll face a much tougher defense in Michigan. Can they run the ball? Or are they going to be one of these teams like Oklahoma under Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma under Kyler Murray, those guys where the quarterback has to be spectacular for them to win? I think if you're Auburn, that's what you want to see. You want to see them lean so heavily on Mateer and his throwing game that you can cause some problems for them. So that's the game. And look, Oklahoma's going to be jacked for that game. Jackson Arnold's homecoming. You have to be a little concerned, I think, from the Auburn standpoint. Is he too jacked up? He's an emotion. You could see he's an emotional player, and that can be a good thing, but that can also bite you at times. So how does he handle coming back, being the villain, wearing the black hat? There'll be ugly signs, I'm sure, in that stadium. He'll hear it on the Tiger Walk into the stadium from Oklahoma fans. So how does he handle the emotional aspect of that? I think that's going to be really, really big for Auburn. But they don't have to be perfect, as you said, Ronnie. You split those two road games at A&M, at Oklahoma, and then at A&M. Split those two, and then you're feeling really, really good about yourself going into the off week before Georgia comes to town. And we still don't know about Georgia.
That's right.
They played Marshall. That doesn't tell us a lot. I hear it's interesting. I heard a lot of Georgia people comparing their Gunnar Stockton to Stetson Bennett. Thank you. The walk-on that they hated until they didn't, until they loved him. And
they won a national championship with him.
Yeah, all he did was help win a couple of national titles. So I heard some comparisons there, but we don't really know about Georgia. We'll know a lot more about Georgia after Alabama comes in there at the end of the month.
Interesting bit of trivia. Auburn gave up over 400 yards passing to Baylor. And in my idiot savant brain, I think Auburn's all-time record in games where they've given up 400 or more yards passing is 10 wins and 0 losses.
Wow.
Interesting bit of trivia. But, and I think the secondary, and Champ Anthony, God, poor guy. I mean, he's just, accident-prone Ollie. Throws a boomerang up and it hits him in the forehead on the way back. I mean, this guy 2 years in a row, and he's got the thumb injury. And as a defensive back, I don't know. I mean, they say he could be back in a few weeks. But the defensive line, I want to ask y'all, that's something Auburn's always hung its hat on. Keldrick Falk, Kieron Crawford. And another interesting thing, there was a great football player at Memphis in the late 80s, Xavier X-Man Crawford. I think he became a professional wrestler. He wore a mask. That's his son, Kieron Crawford. who played at Briarcrest High School in Memphis, where Freeze coached years ago, but he played at Arkansas State. He looked pretty good the other night. What about DeMarcus Riddick? How would y'all grade him? And, Robert Woodyard, 0, had the first tackle in the game. I like this kid. I'll tell you why. Same reason I love Smokey Hodge. People like that. 4th-year junior who has never left. He stuck it out. That ain't nothing, as they say down in LA.
I thought the front seven played with effort and attitude and edge. And there was a play, I'm sure you guys have seen the clip. Keldrick Falk run, I don't know how many yards downfield. He raced to try to make a play. And when your superstar is doing that, and he's setting the tone like that, you're in a good place emotionally with your football team. When you're getting leadership from your players, and he's going to be an All-American. I have no doubt he's going to have an All-American season. And when he's giving that kind of effort downfield, when he could have easily given up on the play, but he didn't. He went and got it. He chased the guy down. That tells me something about that defense. It tells me something about that team.
Well, I think that DJ Durkin, say what you want. I think he's a really good coordinator, and he's a Muschamp guy. He'll get whatever issues there are fixed. I don't have any doubt about that. And if he doesn't, it'll surprise me. But I agree with Kevin. I thought that the front seven played well. And overall, I think it was an impressive performance. Obviously, typically a football team makes the most improvement from week 1 to week 2. But for Auburn, you're not going in and playing, Oklahoma or A&M or anything like that this week. You're playing Ball State, who really isn't very good. So you want to go in and you want to be crisp and you want to be clean and you want to run the offense and the defense the way that the coaching staff wants you to. And playing Ball State is not going to be like playing Baylor or an SEC program. So you've got a chance to clean some things up the next 2 weeks. And, really, but you got to stay healthy too. But you want to, if I'm sitting there, I want to put the ball in the air in these next 2 games. I want to see what Jackson Arnold can do in the game throwing the ball. We know he can run it. And I think he can probably throw it pretty well too, but I think he's got to prove that in the game. And I would let it fly these next 2 games.
I would ask both of y'all 2 things. Auburn's offensive line play. You bring in, Mason Murphy out of California, Southern Cal, and Xavier Chaplin from Virginia Tech, Connor Lew, and getting that. So part 2 of that is, I think Pro Football Focus has Auburn right now 4 first-round draft picks. Caleb Falk is 7 or 8, 10, whatever. And after him, you've got Xavier Chaplin, the big offensive tackle at like 21. I think you've got Eric Singleton Jr.'s at 30. And the other draft pick, Connor Lew out of Kennesaw, Georgia, is 18. The last time Auburn had 4 first-round draft picks was April of 2005, coming off that now recognized 13-0 2004 national championship team. Man, you talk about swinging the pendulum from Hugh Freeze's first press conference, December of 22, as esteemed journalist, our friend and colleague Jason Caldwell said, the worst roster in my lifetime. And growing up in the marble capital of the world, Sylacauga, Jason knows Auburn history.
And the other thing, I agree with not is it the worst roster in certainly in my lifetime. The guy didn't even try. I mean,
that it's nothing against those kids. It's keep going. I'm sorry.
Nothing against the kids. It's just when you're at a place like Auburn, you can't have your roster look like Ball State. I mean, and it wasn't. Look, if you look at probably not that bad, but it's pretty rough. But if you and look, there were a bunch of games that Auburn lost the last 2 years that should have won. But if you look at the schedule, look, the 2 Alabama losses, the one with 4 overtimes and then 4th and 31. The 4th and 31 in particular is pretty inexcusable. look, the roster is clearly improved, and it's better than it's been in years. And the question now is, a lot of these kids played a lot last year, but a lot of them didn't. And you've got a completely new quarterback room. How quickly can these guys gel and play together and be comfortable with each other? I mean, you look at Eric Singleton, a great player, but these guys are still developing a rhythm. I mean, they're still learning how to play together. So,
and that's one of the things that impressed me about Eufaula in calling that game. We've joked before that, in the RPO equation, he's a much bigger fan of the letter P than the letter R in general in his career. But he recognized that the run was there, and he stayed with it.
Yeah.
He didn't get away from it. He wasn't itching to throw the ball down the field. I don't know how many times did he even throw the ball down the field. I remember one to Cam Coleman across the formation, fairly deep, mid-range. But I don't remember a lot of deep throws because they didn't have to. And when Eufaula was asked at his weekly press conference, how much are you going to continue to run Jackson Arnold? And he said something to the effect of, as much as we need to win the game. In other words, he seems willing to adapt and adjust to what is available and what's necessary. And that's a sign of growth in a coach. He's been around a long time, but you still have to be able to evolve. And that's what separated Nick Saban. He was all about defense in the running game for a long time. And then when scoreboards started exploding and Freeze and Gus were running the hurry up, no huddle, well, he adjusted as well. And he started winning that way with offense more than defense. So the fact that Freeze was willing to lean on what was available to win that game told me a lot. And again, you're not going to be able to beat everybody on the schedule with Jackson Arnold carrying it 16 times or whatever he ended up with. You're going to have to be more balanced.
Yeah.
So can they develop that part? Can Jackson Arnold get on the same page with Singleton and Cam Coleman and Malcolm Simmons and all those great receivers against a quality defense? That's what we're going to have to see going forward.
Well,
I think Singleton.
And I think the other thing is, and it doesn't matter if you win games, but Hugh Freeze is coaching at running back U. He's not coaching at Texas Tech. And, Auburn people want to, it's like Terry Bowden was saying today on our podcast, Auburn people want to run the ball. You've got and we had Tommy Bowden on too. You talk about a fun podcast, but, and Tommy was there with 3 Auburn coaches. I'd forgotten he was there with Barfield, but he was there with Barfield, he was there with Dye, and he was there with his brother. And so, I guess I didn't realize that. I knew Dye and Terry, but I didn't realize he was there with Barfield too. So he had coached some of those running backs in the early 80s and was talking about, it was a pretty good conversation, but a lot of great backs have come through Auburn.
Yeah. We run out of time. I just think Auburn people, it's okay to come out after dark. Don't be afraid. You got a good team. And I think this is going to get better. As Coach Dye would always say, or any coach, Bowden, it doesn't matter, Tuberville, Ball State ain't about playing Ball State. It's about Auburn getting better at doing the things they got to improve on. So I'm going to go back right now and watch that podcast with Terry and his brother. That ought to be fun.
I am.
You're on
and,
there too.
I've known both.
That makes it even better.
I started in working there in 95. And I've known both those guys 30 years. And I was actually, it was funny. Tommy and I really developed a close relationship when I was a student. And I asked, there were some things going on in my family and with some drug abuse issues. And so I asked him to come to my high school and speak. And I flew up on the school plane with Terry and Mike Hubbard as a 19-year-old. And he spoke at school, and I've still got I got a signed newspaper from the Fort Payne Times Journal in here hanging on my wall. But that, it's been 30 years. That's hard to believe I've known both those guys that long, but both of them deep down, say what you want to say about either one of them, but they're both really good guys.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. I mean, we see that on the show, man. Great stuff. Executive producer Brendan Martin. We got to wrap it up. It's going to be a fun season, and watch this channel as much as you can. Appreciate it.